Alright, so today we're going to learn about variables. Now variables, the easiest way to imagine them is that you have these boxes. And on these boxes you give them the names x and y for this case. And inside of those boxes we can store information. For these ones we're going to be using numbers. So we can store like 9 into x and 5 into y. And then later on in your program you can then access that and see what number is stored into it. So it becomes a very useful thing in programming. So how we'll create them. For now what we'll do is we'll create these variables x and y. So now we're declared them of type byte. So that way it knows what information can be stored in the variable or into the box. So we told it we're going to be storing bytes. And bytes are values between negative 128 and 127. So as long as it's within that range, we can put it inside the box. So I told them that there's a box named x, and it's given the value 9 to start. Then we can also create y and gave it 5. But then later on in our program, we're allowed to edit the values. So now we can say that x is now 3. So now we just changed our box up here from 9 to 3. You can also do where you use other variables. So you can say that y is equal to x plus 3. And since x is currently equal to 3, that means y is essentially like putting 3 plus 6. But we use x because we want to use the variable, so that way, we can use the variable. So now y would become 9. And we can go through and we can even say y is equal to y plus 1, which normally when you do math, you aren't able to do that, but where it effectively says y is now going to be equal to whatever y is currently equal to, which is 9 plus 1. So it'll set y to 10. Along with that, let's say we wanted to have an even bigger number. Because, if we can only hold numbers between negative 128 and 127, we aren't going to be able to do a lot. So let's imagine we could create an even bigger box, which we actually can. So this bigger box we're going to name z. And for this one, rather than saying that it's a byte, we're going to call it an int, which is short for integer. And ints, they can hold a much, much bigger number. They can hold up to negative 2 billion, or from negative 2 billion all the way up to 2 billion. Plus some others, so you can see there how big it is. But we can hold a much bigger number than we can with a byte. So if we do int z, it'll then create an even bigger box for us to store our numbers in. And just like we can with the bytes, we can do math with them, everything else, just like normal. So if we do z equals z plus 10, this would then become 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 6. But numbers aren't the only type of things that we can store in variables. We can also store letters and characters. And for those we use type char, C-H-A-R. And basically what that does is rather than holding just numbers, it can hold letters, numbers, symbols, everything. So we start out and we give it the value I. So we can think about its box looking something like this. So we give it I and it starts out holding that. We can also give it, just like the others, we can give it another number or another letter. So we can say that W is now equal to Q. So our box up here is now Q. We can also give it numbers. So we can say that W is equal to the letter 2. Now this is different than saying that X is equal to 2. These two numbers are different. Even though we're both saying they're equal to 2, the letter 2 is different than the number 2. So that's just one thing to think about. Along with that, you don't just have to name them, these one-letter names like what we're doing, because that can get kind of confusing after you create several of them. So some examples of variables with longer names would be like these. So you could do like int test count equals 10. Byte small number equals 1. My favorite letter equals t. The normal convention for naming, since you aren't allowed to use spaces, is you do the first word in it lowercase, and then each word starts with a capital letter after that. That's just a standard. You don't have to follow that, but that's what people recommend doing. One thing though with variables, let's say I wanted to access x from inside of loop. So I wanted to say x equals x plus 1 when we go through the loop. However, there's one problem. These variables that we're creating are what are called local variables. We created them inside of void setup because they're between these two brackets. So that means that these variables can only be accessed from inside of here. So if I try to run this code right now, it wouldn't work, because inside a loop, it would have no idea what x is. It doesn't know, is it an int, is it a byte, is it a char? So it has no idea what to do with it. It also doesn't know what the previous value of it was. So if we wanted to do something like this, we would have to change x to become what is called a global variable. So global variables are ones that are, instead of being set inside of a setup or loop, they're created outside of it. So we type byte x equals 9 out here. If we look, this isn't inside of setup or loop. And you're probably kind of confused because earlier we told you all of your code goes inside of here. But there are some certain situations. So like for this, we create a global variable named x. So now down here in setup, we can say x equals 3 and do all our stuff with that. But also in loop, down here, we can say that x equals x plus 1. And this will keep working just the same as what it did inside of setup. So at the end of setup, x was equal to 3. So then down here, this would now be 4. And every time through the loop, it would add one, so it would be 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. So, yeah, that is how we use variables.